Hi friends, I hope you are having a great week. Today we are finishing off Deuteronomy chapter 4 and I want to talk to you about boasting. This is kind of a negative word, something we look down on in most contexts in our society. It's seen as prideful and arrogant, but I think Moses is boasting in our passage for today, and I think that the way that he is boasting and who he is boasting in is the one context where boasting is praiseworthy and right and something that we should do ourselves, because he is boasting not in himself or his people, but in the Lord. I just want to read you some of what he says. It's beautiful, exultant language. He is giving extravagant praise to God, saying, "For ask now of the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that God created man on the earth, and ask from one end of heaven to the other, whether such a great thing has ever happened, or was ever heard of." He's talking about the Exodus. He says, "Has any God ever attempted to go and take a nation for himself from the midst of another nation, by trials, by signs, by wonders, and by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, all of which the Lord your God did for you in Egypt, before your eyes? To you it was shown that you may know this, that the Lord is God. There is no other besides him." I think it's almost as if Moses is issuing a challenge in this first section. It's like he is saying, find me any other human or any other God who is as great and as good as ours is. I dare you. Because he is confident that nobody ever could. When he talks about looking from creation until now, it's like he is saying throughout all of time, since day one up until this point, find me anyone like our God. And he says from one end of the heavens to the other, he's saying throughout all of space, throughout all of our world and whatever is beyond it, can you find me anybody as good as our God? Throughout all of space and all of time, there is nobody like Yahweh, the God of Israel. He's talking about the Exodus because up until this point in human history, the Exodus is the most mighty act of generosity and love and deliverance that the world had ever seen. No mythic story from any other ancient civilization could ever match the God of Israel showing up and delivering a dispirited nation of slaves from the mightiest, most powerful kingdom on earth, Egypt. It was unparalleled and unprecedented what he did for Israel. But Moses doesn't just want them to see that it is mighty. He also wants them to see that it is intimate. He says in verse 37, "Because he loved your fathers and chose their offspring after them and brought you out of Egypt. Therefore, know that the Lord is heaven. The Lord is God in heaven and on earth." He is saying, Yahweh is mighty. There is nobody as powerful as he is. But he is not distant from you. He is intimately close. And he chose you. And he loves you. And that's why he delivered you. Later on in the book of Jeremiah, the prophet says this, and I think this really sums up what's happening in Deuteronomy 4. He says, "Let not the wise man boast in his wisdom. Let not the mighty man boast in his might. Let not the rich man boast in his riches. But let him who boasts boast in this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord who practices steadfast love, justice, and righteousness on the earth. Let him who boasts boast in this, that he knows and understands me. Later on, Paul will pick up this phrase, let him who boasts boast in the Lord, in his letter to the Corinthians. And when he uses this phrase, he is talking to them about the mighty work of God in the cross. And I really think that there is such a parallel between Moses talking to Israel and Paul talking to the church. And just like Moses said to Paul, do you understand how mighty God is and also how deeply he loves you? Paul is now in a post-resurrection world speaking to the church and saying, look at the cross. Look at the resurrection. Look what God did in Jesus. Can you find me anybody throughout all of space-time who is as great and loving as our God? You can't. And so therefore, let him who boasts boast not in themselves, but in the Lord. Right after Moses finishes this speech, he is about to start tiptoeing his way into some of the Mosaic laws that they received at Mount Sinai. Take heart. He's going to start with the 10 Commandments. So hopefully for a lot of us, this will at least be familiar territory to start with before later on towards the heart of the book we get to some more of the laws. But I just hope that as we turn the page into some of these laws, which can be intimidating, I know, I hope that you will keep this sentiment on your heart, that there is nobody as great or as good as our God, and that this is supposed to be the motivator of our obedience. Not because he's some harsh drill sergeant in the sky who's saying, obey, obey. The motivation for our faithfulness is that it is a joy and a privilege to walk in the will and the ways of a God like the one who would part the Red Seas for dispirited slaves and who would go hang on a cross for people like you and me. So may we boast in the Lord, revel in his goodness, and let that be the motivator for us to walk in his ways. Take care, friends.